Hello there. What is going on, everybody? It's time for Legion Talk. We're going to be talking about movement. Do you like to move it and move it? I like to move it and move it. Okay, that's a lame way to open the video, but I had it in my head that I wanted to say some kind of move it joke. And now I got it out of my system. We're going to kind of move forward and just leave that all behind us. This is the fourth part of the new Legion rules, and it's all about movement. They had talked about the high ground. There's movement involved in moving on the ground, moving up, moving down, that sort of thing. And we're going to talk about that in today's video. If you guys haven't already, I hope you've been watching. We've been doing lots of Life Day giveaways all month long. There's more to come. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. Plus, we have the lightsaber given away that's running through New Year's. You got plenty of time for that as well. Also want to thank today's sponsor, Luxury Playstyle. Get your last minute holiday gifts in now. Head over to luxuryplaystyle.com. Find some amazing tokens. Let people in your life know, hey, I'm looking for some tokens. I love to play Legion. I love to play X-Wing or Magic the Gathering, all this stuff. They have tokens compatible with all of these games. You're going to save 15% by using code Crabbok VIP. They're absolutely fantastic. This is your time. And again, if you got to get something for somebody and it's too close to the holidays, you can still just print out that little receipt or that packing slip or the image of, hey, here's what I got you. They can just print it out, put it in a card or an envelope, so it makes for a great last-minute gift. All right, let's head over into this particular article. Movement is, this is actually probably overall a little bit of a smaller change than some of the other ones that we've seen, but some of them it'll have cascading effects. And this is also, because this is the fourth and final rules change, it is become very apparent that while these are 4 different articles that they've talked about that are highlighting 4 different areas of the rules changes, there's a lot of other changes that have not been brought up or fully detailed in these lists of changes. That makes me think that the rules change is going to have a lot more than just this. And I think these are just 4 noteworthy changes, but there's going to be lots of others. And they even talk about some of the others here that they don't actually give us much detail on. They say, oh, these things have changed too. So that's interesting. So let's talk about movement. The first part of this entire article, and again, you can go over to atomicmassgames.com/Star Wars Legion transmissions/movement to check this out. Of course, they put this out on social media as well. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link down in the description. And while you're down there, you can also jump in our Discord and other social media links, Patreon, all that kind of stuff, Crabbok.com. We got that AI system for Legion too. So if you want to check out any of that cool stuff, it's over on Crabbok.com. So basically, they're talking about there were some problems with movement that people didn't, some folks didn't like. There were some places where people would be trapped, or because opening up, they're talking about how you're actually supposed to slide the miniature along the movement tool. This is more or less something that's typically done with vehicles and not really done with small base miniatures. And so a lot of times, you lay the movement tool down, you just kind of pick the trooper up and put it to the side. However, to the letter of the law, technically you're also supposed to slide the miniature along the movement tool as well. And because the miniature is just a few millimeters wider than the movement tool, maybe more than a few millimeters, but but yeah, it's just a little bit wider than the movement tool. That would mean that if you were around a corner of a building or something like that, you wouldn't actually have the maneuver tool be able to come into contact with a piece of terrain or something like that. So you have to do kind of wider turns around the edge of a rectangular building or things like that. And so what they're doing is they're completely changing that. You don't have to move the miniature along the path of the tool anymore. You're just going to simply pick it up and put it down there, which is how I think everybody has played it anyway. And so that's cool. That makes sense. However, they do point out that only applies to small base miniatures. Notched miniatures, unchanged. So they still have to move along the tool. Now, the thing that's strange to me is I'm like, okay, then I don't know, why you bothered with that. To me, that's such a minute change that I don't know a single case in my entire life of playing Legion where somebody was moving a small base miniature and said, "Oh, you've got to be able to, like you got to move them all the way there." I mean, it's probably happened at least once or twice, but it's an interesting thing. I'll bring my final thoughts on all of these a little bit later on. So initially, if you're reading over this, the first part of this is like, oh, this is not much of a change at all. That's fine. To me, that's maybe just a cleaning up of the rules, making the rules reflect the gameplay, as opposed to trying to make gameplay reflect new rules. So I'm like, okay, I'm on board with that. So they've altered the way that those units move, and here's kind of an excerpt from the actual rules document. It says, to perform a standard move, take a movement tool of lower or equal speed of the moving unit and place it flat on the battlefield, so that one end wholly touches the base of the unit's unit leader. The unit's unit leader. I like the way that they worded that. That makes me think that there's going to be some leader stuff happening. I don't know. But then again, I think that would have been worthy of an article, more so than movement at least. Then, the player may adjust the joint of the movement tool as they wish. After the movement tool has been adjusted, pick up the unit leader miniature. Pick up the unit leader miniature and place it either wholly touching the other end of the movement tool or anywhere centered along the path created by the movement tool, moving the movement tool out of the way and placing the miniature on the battlefield. A unit may choose to use a movement tool of a lower speed when performing a move, unless otherwise specified. So, there we go. There is some redundancy in this, because it already says take a movement tool of lower speed or equal speed. So it already says that you can use a slower one, but then it goes and says you can use a slower one again, which is interesting. I don't know. Because that one says to perform a standard move. And it says, unless otherwise specified. Well, of course, unless otherwise specified. I don't know. I don't know. It's a little bit redundant. After placing the unit leader miniature, pick up any other miniatures in the unit and place them in cohesion. If, for any reason, a miniature cannot be placed in cohesion at the end of a move, place it as close as possible to the unit leader. There you go. And I guess I'm not even sure if that's a change. I have never had a situation where I couldn't place a miniature in cohesion. I was trying to move into a spot that there was no cohesion. So as close as possible. I mean, that's fine, I suppose. Still, this is a whole lot of new rules so far, explaining what accounts to virtually no change to 99.9% of games that have ever been played. So if you don't like the idea of new rules so far, you're in luck. But here's where it gets a little bit different. They're going to talk about climb and clamber. And climb and clamber are basically getting all completely reworked. Clamber is actually gone. Clamber does not exist anymore. You cannot clamber. Instead, the climb has been basically changed. And also they're talking about difficult movement. Used to be that if a piece of terrain was half of the miniature or less, then it was a difficult move to move over it. So like barricades, a speed 2 unit would have to do a speed 1 move if it was going over difficult terrain or over a barricade that was going to be something that was going to be considered difficult terrain, or something that was going to be at least like waist high, or at least half of the silhouette. So now they can move over freely anything that is not taller than the standard silhouette. Considering that some of these miniatures are not quite as tall as the silhouette, although most of them are about there, that means you might be able to completely walk right through something that you can't even see over. I mean, technically you could see over it though, because it's the silhouettes there. Like R2-D2, for example, is an egregious example of that. But yeah, so that's interesting, and that's just a normal movement. So let me read what they're talking about here. Let's put it in their words. There was another part of the movement rule we knew we wanted to address to make the battlefield more dynamic and exciting, while eliminating cumbersome and unintuitive rules language. Navigating vertical terrain has changed to allow players more freedom to explore and bring elevation to their games of Legion, even for units that don't have the jump keyword. Clambering has been eliminated from the game, and abilities and cards or cards that involve climbing or clambering, like Expert Climber or Scale, have been revisited. I want to point out at this point that we don't know how those have been revisited. I have thoughts and I have speculation, but we don't know how those have been revisited. It's also unclear if Jump has been revisited because effectively they've, for units that don't have the Jump keyword, everybody's getting Jump from a certain point of view. Although I think Jump will probably be unchanged because it still works, but it's certainly less valuable now than it used to be, but okay. Yeah. So, that don't have the Jump keyword. Clambering has been eliminated. Right, they've been revisited. Units may now move over obstacle terrain shorter than the height of their silhouette with no penalty, which is very interesting. Now, they say obstacle terrain, so I'm really wondering, I believe terrain is going to actually be part of the new rules. More defining obstacle terrain, or if there's going to be area terrain that's difficult terrain. What counts as obstacle terrain to them? Is every piece of terrain obstacle terrain? I feel like, that needs a lot more explanation, because I have a feeling there's going to be things that are considered obstacle terrain and other things that are specifically not considered obstacle terrain, and I'd like to know what their thought process is here. Because what if I have a big piece of area terrain, but it's also not higher than the silhouette? Can they still move on to that? Are we still considering area terrain difficult move? Or is that something we have to kind of vote on at the beginning? But yeah, so units may now move over obstacle terrain shorter than the height of their silhouette with no penalty. If a terrain is taller than the silhouette, the unit must do a climb movement to move up onto or over it. A climb is a speed 1 move that allows the unit to also move a vertical distance up to height 1. A vertical distance, the vertical distance up to height 1 means a difference in up to height 1. So if you're somewhere high, generally if you wanted to move down, that's still a height 1 move. It's still going to be a climb. So a climb is basically, there was 2 things lumped into that. The first is the moving over obstacle terrain. And from the sounds of it, I feel like obstacle terrain is going to be like a piece of scatter terrain or like a small piece of terrain, not area terrain. That's my guess. But still, I'd like to read and see what they think, because I don't want to guess too much. So we have the obstacle terrain piece. And the interesting thing about that is for most trooper miniatures, it's not going to change much. For some notched base miniatures, like I want to take like the detachment notched trooper bases. So let's talk about like the mortars or the emplacement guns that the Rebel veterans have. They're pretty short, but because they're notched, they have that really tall silhouette now, which means like I can have a mortar that's behind something that the miniature doesn't even come up. Like the miniatures, can't see over it if I were to measure from their head. But since they have this new silhouette, I can actually move right through stuff that seems way counterintuitive. So that's interesting. But I think of them because I play those miniatures way more than I play other notched-based miniatures. Like I don't run dewbacks very often, or FD turrets. I don't run the ones that actually go all the way up to the top of the notched-based silhouette for troopers. I don't run those tall ones as much. I usually run the shorter ones. So to me, that's where my mind goes. But I'm curious where your guys' mind goes for some of this, because again, this is using their silhouette. And so for all of those trooper minis that are on a notched base, they're still going to use that really tall silhouette. So that's going to be wild. And then that height is kind of like close to the FD turret's height, but that one can't move anyway. So very interesting. The other thing in there is climb. Climb is getting a change that is very reminiscent to how flying works in Marvel Crisis Protocol, where you basically just say, it's not really flying. Flying just lets you basically take your movement template and kind of say, all right, I'm going from here, like top down. Kind of just imagine all the terrain were completely flat and just say, all right, my guy's going from here to here, even though there's like a building like right here. As long as it's not more than a height 1 difference from where I was to where I'm starting, I can just climb onto there. I'm curious how you get to something that's just over height 1. Does that mean it's completely inaccessible, or can you do like a double climb action? Because there was always that sort of thing that you could do before. Or are ladders going to allow you to do more, like to go higher on a climb action? In all of these things, I'm curious how deep they've gone into climb, because there's plenty of terrain out there that is more significant than a height 1 difference from where you start to where you might stop. There's a lot of height 2 terrain in the game, and so what if a trooper wants to get up on there? I don't know if I don't know if that's gonna allow them to do that. Although normally you could have done like a double clamber to sort of get up on there. So I'm curious how that's all going to work. But let's see what else we've got here. In our playtests, opening the high ground to all armies allowed for some very exciting tactics and emergent strategies, as well as really unleashing players' imaginations to create and utilize exciting new terrain setups that added to the game experience rather than hindering it. And with that, our preview series detailing some of the key highlights for the upcoming Star Wars Legion core rulebook come to a close. Now all that's left is to count the days until the official release, 16 January 2023. Until then, stay tuned, as there's plenty more Legion content coming your way as we take our first steps into an exciting new year. So let's talk about some of my thoughts on all of this. I think I kind of already gave you my thoughts for the beginning part. Movement. I don't understand why you opened with a change on movement where really nothing changed. Maybe it might be that vehicles could have used for a little bit easier movement in some cases. Although a lot of them, some of the biggest, nastiest defenders have hover, which kind of gives them some wiggle room on that. And I am curious if they're going to allow, certain any changes to how hover works and that sort of movement. I kind of hope not. I hope they just keep movement simple. I don't think movement was complicated. And I don't think the changes they've done are really significant. I think everybody already played it that way anyway. I've never, again, like I said before, I've never seen a use case where somebody said, "Oh, you actually have to do a wide turn because you can't clear that building if you're moving your small base miniature." It never happened to me. So, but then again, my play experience could be different than yours. So I'd love to hear from you guys. But from those who I've talked to, that seems like nobody really thinks that that's really much of an issue. The bigger issue, it comes from basically the information that they left out. Climbing is a pretty big change. The change to climb. It basically gives everybody jump 1 if they use a speed 1 maneuver. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. I'm curious how they're going to classify a climb action now. Is that going to technically be a speed 1 move? Are you able to do something like, for example, if Darth Vader as an operative, all right, he's got spur. Is he going to be able to spur on a climb? Is he going to, how is climb going to be classified? I'm not sure. Because it says, to perform a climb, a unit performs a move as normal, except that it must use the speed 1 tool. So, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, that wording for that is written just so strangely. It doesn't mesh with other things that interact. Is it a speed 1 move? Is it a speed 1 move, or is it a standard move? Is it or a different type of move altogether? And the speed 1 must use a speed. Is that eligible to be influenced by other things that influence movement? If I have burst of speed, while I'm doing a climb, can I now all of a sudden just get a speed 3 jump out of that? That's my question. A miniature may move a vertical distance up to height 1 when making a climb, and that's also another interesting thing, because let's say there's a corner of a building, well, that's a bad one because that's kind of, I've got a card here. Let's say my unit's here, and I want to go through the building this way, speed 1. Let's say it's a snowtrooper unit, somebody who's already speed 1. I normally can't do that. I'd have to go around. It would only put me here. But maybe I want to do the triangle and get a little farther forward. Well, now if I climb, I can cover more distance than a regular move because I went up and over. So why is it easier for me to go up and over and then down as opposed to around, right? And I feel like that's a rare thing that can happen. But so I'm curious, what happens if I decide I want to climb, but I end on the same elevation that I started? Like I went up and over, or over fences and things like that. I'm curious how all of these things are going to end up working out. And I have a feeling a lot of that will be detailed in the rules, but some of this writing is just written in very, I guess plain text English, which again, it's hard to fault somebody for writing stuff in plain text English, but when all of the rules interactions kind of expect all the tie-ins and the hooks that all the cards have, expect certain rules, like a speed 1 move. Is it a speed 1 move? Is it a speed X move, right? Is it a standard move? Because they said a move as normal. There's no such thing as a move as normal. There's a standard move, but a standard move is a very specific type of move, right? So that's why I'm just wondering about all of these little things like that, like what all interactions are going to be allowed, which ones are going to be forbidden, and because there's so many things that do influence movement. And speaking of which, what about jump? Right? If everybody's got jump 1, no. Obviously, jump 2 has its advantages, and my guess is that jump will remain the same because it simply allows you to use your existing speed. However, if for some reason your speed gets reduced through maybe an immobilized token, or I don't think there's any units in the game that are speed 1 with jump. I don't think that happens to exist right now. But in theory, if you had a speed 1 unit with jump, they'd be the same as every other unit in the game, right? Because everybody has speed 1 jump. A speed 1 jump, right? So, all right. So I don't know if jump is due for some kind of change. Not sure. But the other thing is that, because this is just interesting. It's just interesting. And the more I think about it, the more little use cases what if I've got area terrain? What if area terrain is classified somehow differently? Could I do a climb over area terrain that way and kind of ignore some of that? Although generally, if it's a speed 1 move, I mean that's how it was already. You could always do it. You're always reduced by 1 to a speed 1. So yeah, it's a lot of little things I'm curious about because of the way that it's worded. But then also, they talk about things like expert climber and scale, how those have been changed, but they don't tell us how. Right? They've been revisited. Well, I would imagine that I'm going to want to look at those right away. I don't know what expert climber is going to do, unless it gives you maybe expert climber lets you climb to height 2 instead of 1. I'm not sure. If since they're kind of borrowing Marvel Crisis Protocol's movement, because that's basically exactly how movement works in Marvel Crisis Protocol. If you don't have flying, or if you're a speed 1 flying, you just kind of go over that way. Basically, having flying lets you do the same thing, but use your full movement. So I imagine they're going to basically turn expert climber into wall crawler for Marvel Crisis Protocol, which or flying in Marvel Crisis Protocol, which basically means you can still do the climb, but you get to use your full movement instead of a speed 1, which is something. But then what about scale? Because scale was actually really good. Scale was better significantly. And then grappling hooks went up. So I imagine expert climber is probably going to be basically give your unit flying. And scale lets you kind of do a free move after you clamber, or a free clamber after you move. And he also gives you unhindered. All right. So you're like, wait a second, this is really good. How's that going to work now? Is it going to give you a bonus move? Is scale going to be weighted? Are they going to change it to where it's good enough to how, for the units that have it already? I think it should be, but it's hard to say. I have a hard time guessing how unless they just turn expert climber and scale into the same thing. But what about unhindered? They don't talk about unhindered. yet. Maybe that'll be the same, but I feel like especially for a notched base unit, and almost anything that's going to be taller than a mini's silhouette, any miniature, almost any terrain that's going to be taller than their silhouette is going to require a climb anyway. So it's not like you're going to be trying to move. There's going to be so few, very, very, very few pieces that are taller than a silhouette, but not a height 1, to kind of warrant, I don't know. That's, and it says, like, you can make standard moves onto or through obstacles that are shorter than the height of the moving units. So what is Unhindered going to do? Is it going to let you just do the same thing as what Expert Climber might do? I don't know how they're going to do Unhindered with all of that. And again, in the units that have these, and not just the upgrades, because you can increase a point cost on an upgrade, but what about other units that, like what about environmental gear? What if you wanted to put that on snow troopers? Didn't it come with snow troopers, but they're already speed 1 anyways? Nobody ever put it on them. Will there be a reason to now? I'm curious about all of these things, and how the rewording of certain rules and move types and things like that are going to interact with everything else. And with the way that they've kind of worded a climb, a move as normal, except that it must use the speed 1 tool, is climb an action? Is it considered a move action? Is it? And I'm guessing it is. I'm also kind of guessing it's a speed 1 move, but it might not be. Does that mean that if it's considered a speed 1 move, does that mean that I can force push somebody off a cliff now? What do you think? That's the kind of interactions that it's hard to really gauge what they want you to be able to do, and if you can, then that would be pretty cool, because force pushing somebody off a cliff would be really fun. But since you're not clambering anymore, you're not going to take damage from it, so it'd kind of be cool to be able to force push somebody down, and if they don't have Expert Climber or something like that, then maybe they take a damage. I don't know. But then again, we're getting into really complex stuff, and they seem to want to really simplify everything, and I guess so. It's just I always get a little cautious when I see them copying Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff onto a different game, and that's kind of what they've done here. So it makes me wonder, boy, what's coming next? What else are they going to take from Marvel Crisis Protocol? Just has me a little cautious, so we'll be definitely reading through the new rules on January 16th when they go live, and going over those, and of course we'll be talking about it. It might even be a live stream. I don't know if I'll live stream that, or probably would be a good one to live stream. Let me know if you think that's something we should do. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Big thanks to all my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing. Be sure to like the video, share the video, all that good stuff. Patrons are going to get an extra shot at any of the 12 Days of Life Day gifts that don't get claimed, so stay tuned for that. And that is going to do it. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to all the patrons you see here, A-Wing level and above. Get their names in the credits. And may the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. So say we all. You can't take the sky from me. Hakuna Matata. And happy holidays.